What's going on?
I just got another email from SH Guideline. I actually went in to check last week. It says I got that again.
Chlamydia?
Don't you think like everyone in Japan has chlamydia, so there's no point to...
We should ask someone who knows.
Hi Tokyo Tops! How are you guys? My name is Laviana and I'm here pleased to be with these two cuties.
So today we have our sex fairy godmother with us because December 1st is World AIDS Day. So we thought it'd be a great opportunity to talk about sexual health, sexual education, and everything in between.
I'm a drag queen performer here in Tokyo, Japan. I'm originally from Brazil. I was born in Brazil and I came to Japan when I was 3 years old. I basically lived my whole life in Japan. I work with like sexual wellness and I do sex ed performance.
Welcome.
Welcome. That's perfect. To me, I feel Japan is kind of behind. Especially not like the technology where their medical technology. It's not something like that, but it's just people's concept where their understanding of having STI is totally different from people from the West. I believe not so many people are getting tested.
No.
That's right? Is that true?
I think that's correct. Okay. In the school system in Japan, the education system in Japan, the sources for like sex ed is very limited. When you get like in junior high school, second, third year, they have like one hour of like sex ed on school.
And we're talking about 1 hour.
1 hour like across multiple
like
years.
A year. And then I think in high school, like when we are like 16, 17 years old, we have like 3 hours to 5 hours maybe in a year. So yeah, it's got very limited hours. The teachers are not trained to teach about sex ed and like the parents are not trained to teach about sex ed. There's this war between like teachers and parents say like, oh, the school should teach. Oh no, the parents should teach. So at the end, like,
no one teaches. And my understanding as well is like that couples don't really talk about sex either. Like straight couples aside, even when I'm talking to guys on apps or I'm trying to set up some sort of sex date or something like that, if I ever get into talk about sex, most of the time, people, they kind of get distant from me when I'm saying like, so, you know, are we gonna bring condoms or how are you regularly tested, this and that? They kind of then look at me as suspicious almost. That's something that's, at least from where, like my country, that's something that we tend to have that discussion. And here it's kind of like, why are we talking about this? I'm like, if we're gonna have sex, we should be talking about this, right?
I want to be aware, you know?
Yes.
Like, what was your age to get like sex educated? Like there's a word for that,
school.
right? Like a bird, like honey and bird conversation.
No, it's the birds and the bees.
Birds and bees.
In Canada, I do remember being in grade 6. I would say there was still an incredible amount of stigma surrounding STIs and more importantly HIV. I still have so much stigma like that was put on me. You know, like if you're gay, you're gonna get HIV and then you're gonna die. And it created this terror in me that I really don't think Canada was that good.
If you want to rate Japan's sex education and also like people's understanding of STI from 1 to 10, how are you gonna score it?
Can I get like a 0?
Oh,
really? Do you think it's that bad?
It's very bad. Recently, I looked through some like textbooks in schools. And I think they talk about puberty when the kids are 11 years old, like 11 to 12 years old before going to junior high school in Japan. But they talk about like HIV or stuff like that, I think after the age of like 15, 16. And it's briefly, they say like, oh, like HIV can be transmitted through like sexual intercourse or like through blood, DNA, or like to using this, like sharing like needles, stuff like that. It can be prevented with condom, and that's it. Like they just say about it.
Next.
And nowadays, like they have like a little bit of like gonorrhea or chlamydia, but like it's very, very briefly. I think like the teachers don't even mention.
Wow.
It's on the textbook, but they don't even mention about it. Sex ed is not only about teaching about like sex itself, but also like all those things surrounding sexuality. Yeah, it's very important. So I think like they don't teach that in Japan.
Please correct me if I'm wrong, but like I feel like if I'm going to Hatemba or something like that, I don't see a lot of condom use. Even if I start having sex with someone, that whole idea, that whole talk around that, or it's just non-existent. You know what I mean?
And it's funny, like I love to go cruising, different cruising spots around the world, like when I travel. Normally, like when I went like to other countries, like cruising spots, they always have like condoms in each room. While in Japan, they only have like at the entrance.
Yeah, you have to ask
normally,
for it.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
normally like allowed to take like only one condom.
Yeah.
So that for me was like something very shocking. That's I think it connects to the lack of people getting tested in Japan.
Yeah.
First, like there are a lot of stigmas. Second, there's so many like shameness.
I ask, have you been tested? They say, oh, don't worry, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And I say, what
As
does
if,
that
like,
mean?
yeah, as
Like,
if,
how
like-
can you know?
Yeah.
Not getting tested equals negative.
I feel like get tested in Japan is kind of expensive.
It's so expensive.
Right?
That's like the other part of like why it's so inaccessible in Japan. So
Hold on, let's explain why. My guess is that because in Japan, you can only really get tested for free under insurance if you have symptoms.
symptoms. But I think like it's the whole Japanese healthcare system, welfare system. It's not about prevention. It's more about like treatment.
That makes total sense
That's
to me.
why like
yeah.
PrEP it's so expensive in Japan. Like it's very hard to access because PrEP is only something to prevent, not something to treat. Whereas like when you're HIV positive, like everything is insuranced, so it's much lower price.
That's a perfect way to explain it. But I would also like to say, like, I had this story recently where I went in, you know, I was like, I think I should get checked out to a doctor, you know, and he just instantly jumped in and was very shaming. He was like, are you married? Are you cheating on your wife? There are so many wrong things coming out of your mouth. And I felt it was very shaming,
yeah, it is.
you know. How often do you think people should get tested?
I think it depends on your sexual life, how active you are. For example, for me, I'm a very active person, so I get tested every month.
Every month.
Every month?
Every month, yeah. At least like HIV, gonorrhea, and chlamydia every month. So if you're like not that very active, maybe every 3 months, or like if you only like have a steady relationship every 6 months is okay too. If you don't have sex, like no need to worry, I would say.
The more the merrier.
How often do you get tested?
I go every 3 months, yeah.
Good. Yeah.
But like, I don't have any sex life recently, but I still go. Just to
I
make
think
sure.
it's good to get in the habit.
It's not bad to have sex. Like, I think it's a right for humans to be seeking for sexual pleasure. And this is something that lacks in the Japanese community, in the Japanese society. They think like it's something to shame or it's very
Yes.
taboo. So like it's not bad to have sex. If you want to, go have sex. If you don't want to, it's okay. But like if you're having very regular sex, just get tested more regularly, then
I kind of segues into another thing that I want to talk about is I want to talk about the stigma. It's a worldwide thing.
yeah.
But I think in particular, I feel it very strongly in Japan. You know, I've had STIs and I want to tell these people, well, you know, I got an STI. I think you should go to the doctor. We've had sex, this and that. There are people who are like, thank you for telling me, and they'll go and they'll get tested. And then there are people who are outright just block me. It makes me feel so unlovable. I think the next time when that happens, I say, maybe I shouldn't tell anyone because people are they're gonna block me, they're gonna hate me. And I think it's that fight with myself because I think, no, that's gonna make STIs worse. I feel like they're walking away being like, oh, you dirty slut.
nasty
Yeah, you're a
slut,
nasty
yeah.
slut. You like, and that loss of value and like feeling that unlovableness, it's very painful.
At the end of the day, you're the only one that can protect yourself, and in the public health, it's very important if you get tested and you're positive to notice all your sexual partners. But I don't think it's necessarily like you have to almost like a coming out to your partners, right? Like if you are concerned that people will like go away, maybe like those people are not necessarily like worth being around. And like don't be ashamed. Like no matter people tell you, it's just like you just have to like that's your right.
Yeah.
And like you were consent with these people, this person to have sex.
All of you at home, don't feel ashamed.
Because me and Andrew both speak Japanese, so we do have lots of like places to visit, like doctors to see, and getting more exposure to different services they have in Japan. But for people like who don't have the same level of like the Japanese levels, like where can they seek information, or is PrEP accessible in Japan?
If you live in Tokyo or Osaka, there might be more options, but other than that, like it's very limited. I have like this very useful link by Stonewall Japan, which is an organization towards the LGBTQ plus community, foreign community living in Japan. They have like a list of like sexual health clinics that you can get access to with English information.
And that's all across Japan?
Yeah, all across
great.
Japan.
Okay.
Like you have like the major cities.
Yeah.
So maybe like if you want an English assistant, you have to go to the closest bigger city. And other sources, we have like the Place Tokyo, which is an organization, NPO organization that works to assist people living with HIV or AIDS in Japan, and they have English assistants too. It was mainly in Tokyo, but now they're doing like online counseling too. And also, I think like to get PrEP, it's a very big topic, right? So I'm going to this clinic in Ueno Kachimachi. It's called like the Personal Health Clinic.
Okay.
And they have a very accessible, which is like 1,000,000 yen per month.
Okay.
If you get 3 months, it's like 2,000,000 yen. And if you get like 6 months, it's like 4,200,000 yen something. They have like English assistants as well. Like their website, they have it in English as well. And they do online as well.
So you don't have to go to the clinic. They can ship it to you.
Yeah.
Wait. But then what do you do about kidney tests at that point?
So like normally I think probably you should go to the clinic close by to do the kidney test, because they do the follow-up testing.
Okay.
When we go there.
So once you sign up with them, they'll do kidney tests after.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did like before.
Yeah. And then you just bring it in.
Okay. I go every month to get like the blood test and urine test, and they do like the kidney test as well there. So like, but I think if you do online, they'll have like the STI check tester, which they send by mail. So you can resend to them, and then they will like prescribe like and send you
super useful to know.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this happens so much in Japan, if there's a word for it. PrEP whore, was that what you were called?
Oh,
right.
Yeah, we have something like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you feel stigma because you're taking PrEP?
No, I think that's you. I'm very verbal about my STI, so...
Is that common in China? Like...
Oh no, like China... China is no better than Japan in terms of like sex education, okay? Because we are also very stigmatized about having those kind of disease. Like having HIV is still like you're gonna die soon, where like you're doing something dirty, you cheated on your wife, you're gay, it's still like that.
If China has that sort of level of stigma and you grew up in that environment, I want to learn, I want to be more like you, I want to be less ashamed. How do you get to that point where you are very sex positive in that way and saying,
I'm not very sex positive.
But when you're talking about STIs and stuff like that, it seems to me like you talk about it, you're not. I'm saying, how do you do that? Because I want to be like that.
But I'm ashamed in another area. I think the more sex you have, the further you're away from your true love.
Oh, sorry, that's what you think.
That's what I think.
What you think, yes.
Yeah, that's what I feel like. Because people will see you as filthy, you're not like a partner, you're like a sex friend or something like that. They don't see you as someone who's dateable. I still be stigmatized by that, but maybe not by STI.
Infections themselves.
Because why? Because I got them so many times that I don't get especially in Japan. I'm just over it right now.
Yeah. You have all these people who look at Japan and they're like so shokudanshi and stuff like that, right? Like all these Japanese people don't have sex. And then I go out and I'm like, yeah, they do. Like I'm looking around and you see it everywhere, but it's very much like blocked away. It's in the shadows, you know what I mean?
I don't even think it's in the shadow. It's so obvious on the street, like when you pass by. It's not like, it's not in a hidden alley or anything. That's why I feel amazed about Japan, because in China, those places will be hidden. Like you can't find them. But like in Japan, they have advertisement in Shinjuku on a huge truck and have the loudest music about Fuzoku.
But I think that's the thing. People are thinking that the type of people who are going to do that are not me or this person or my wife or my husband, even though it is. Like everyone is doing it. Somehow people like block it out to say like, oh, like sure, it might happen, but like a certain type of people do it. You know what I mean?
No, I actually disagree.
Really?
I feel like all the Japanese wives know their husbands going to Fuzoku sometimes. And they don't see it as cheating.
They kind of like agree with it, like, but not agreeing, like verbally, but like just like, okay, if you want to have sex, go have sex somewhere else.
Yeah, like I feel like it's, in Chinese we have a phrase called like 睁一只眼闭一只眼. So you open one eye but close one eye. Like you kind of pretend that you don't know, but like you actually know. I feel like that's their attitude. I don't think
they can keep up the tatemae of their perfect family. You can do whatever you want in the background.
Like so they don't say out loud, but like everybody's doing.
I'm in situations where there's so much barebacking. I think that PrEP knowledge is increasing, but I would say that compared to like other countries, it's quite low still. But I personally feel like there's a lot of barebacking. So there are times there where I wonder whether they have the information, whether they know because, or they think I'm not at risk, so I can bareback.
Yeah, this is like something I'm very concerned too, because just because you have PrEP doesn't mean like it's gonna prevent you for all STIs. But again, it's not 100%. So there's no safe sex, such thing.
Safer sex.
Safer
Always
sex.
Safer sex. You have to know the proper information, have the decisions to do or not to do certain things.
Do you feel the younger generation, like the Gen Z, have better understanding than older generation? I want to see if there is any like improvement, because I haven't been meeting anyone from Gen Z recently. So what do you think?
My personal experience, I think yes. They know like how to utilize like information or like internet. So I think like they're more aware of those stuff too, like STIs, HIV.
My experience is slightly older. I'm like 30 years old. And so I only, like when I was aggressively hook up with other people, like people around my age. So like maybe 5 years ago or even 10 years ago, the situation was very different. The knowledge was very limited. But I do realize like the Gen Z in Japan, like they're pretty open to LGBT.
Yeah.
Right? Like on TikTok, it's so common for them to see the representation and also like the famous YouTubers. So I feel like maybe they're different, they're evolving already. So I have so many questions about STI. I believe most of Japanese guys have chlamydia because I'm getting it over and over again. If it's not in my ass, it's in my throat.
This is the thing, like people don't think that you can get like by sucking or blowjobs.
I get it so many times. It's always here.
It's very important to use a condom even like when blowjobbing to prevent STIs, but like who does that?
Who does that?
Who does that?
Also, I don't think like they get tested in their throat or in their butt, because like to have like a urine test is more common, but like to have a throat or like butt test, it's so hard to get in Japan. There's no many clinics that does that. Gonorrhea and chlamydia is very, very high positive rate in Japan, and especially with like amongst young people.
At this point, I'm so tired of getting chlamydia every single time. So should I just leave it? What does it like do to me?
Well, like it can cause like other heavier symptoms, like like infertility, those kind of things. Just don't live it. You're gonna suffer. Never live an STI. Never live it.
Even chlamydia.
Even chlamydia, gonna like never live it. Like if you have it, just get rid of it.
It will never cure itself on its own.
Yeah.
I have a question. Where can we see your show?
I'm always like doing shows at Shinjuku Nichome or Shibuya. Just check my Instagram so you can see where I'm gonna be.
Follow her on Instagram. Go to her show. Learn about sex. And have some entertainment along the way. Have a drink.
Just have a drink. Information's on the description below, so like just seek for the proper one for you and then just get tested.
Perfect. I will see you next time.
Bye.
Hi Tokyo Toms, let's give free condoms to everybody. Woo!
Come with us. Let's give some interviews and give some condoms out.